The Amanda Project by Melissa Kantor and Amanda Valentino. Chapter 28. OMG! Have you heard? Tracy, apparently riding off my behavior at lunch yesterday to PMS, was jumping up and down with excitement about her news, and I tried to feign at least mild interest. Even under the best circumstances, I wasn't one for jumping up and down over anything before 9 a.m. My life was definitely way too confusing to qualify as the best of circumstances. Heard what? Around us, the population of Endeavor was slowly starting its day, but it seemed to me there were more than the usual number of people whispering in small groups and talking in hushed voices. I perked up at the possibility that it might have something to do with Amanda, but then realized the odds of Tracy hearing something about her before I did were so low as to be non-existent. Okay, you know Bea Rossiter? She lowered her voice on Bea's name. I felt a sudden wave of dizziness and reached for the nearby wall of lockers. Luckily, Tracy was too pumped to notice. Well, these really fancy plastic surgeons at Johns Hopkins have donated their time to her cause. Can you believe it? Tracy ran a hand through her hair as if it weren't already flawlessly framing her face. They're going to, rebuild her face, like that girl on... What was that soap we used to watch, the one with the hot doctor? Tracy squished her nose up in concentration and shook her head. Whatever. Anywho, she's about to go from super freak to super chic. Wow, that is so amazing. My mind was racing. Was it just a coincidence this was happening the day after my conversation with Heidi's mom? Could Brittany and her husband have anonymously donated the money for Bea's surgery? Suddenly, I thought of something. Maybe the reason the unflappable Brittany Bragg had gotten so hysterical about what I'd told her wasn't that she didn't believe me, but because she did. I grabbed Tracy's arm. Who told you this? I was so sure I knew what Tracy's answer would be that I almost didn't hear what she said. Kevin, maybe? Or wait, no, Kelly texted me this morning. Or did Kevin tell me first? I can't remember. She shrugged. But not Heidi? Tracy shook her head. I haven't even seen her today. Look, I got a motor. We'll talk at lunch, okay? And I have to tell you about this super hot dress I got at Lollipop yesterday. You're gonna flip. And with that, she turned and was swept up into the crowd. The whole morning passed in a haze. I heard more details about Bea's surgeries. She wasn't in school because they'd already brought her to Baltimore to be evaluated. The Rossiters had been so shocked when they got the call that Mrs. Rossiter fainted. No one knew if the surgeons would rebuild her face exactly if it had been, or if she'd look completely different when the surgery was over. But never the one fact I wanted to hear. Was this a donation from Johns Hopkins? Or was it a donation from a more local source? We had a sub in history, and the woman was a witch with eyes in the back of her head, so there was no way for me and Heidi to exchange a word, much less a note. Still, the way she waved hello to me indicated that her mother had said nothing about our conversation yesterday morning. At first I was confused. Then, as the period went on, I found myself getting angry. Okay, so maybe the story had a happy ending, but the beginning and the middle hadn't been so pretty. Bea had spent months walking the corridors of Endeavor like the living dead, and was now going to have to endure or probably painful surgeries just to look halfway normal again. I'd been hiding a terrible secret, only to be called a liar and a freak by my friend's mom when I did the right thing and told the truth. And Heidi had... what? I sincerely doubted the girl had so much as lost a night's sleep over the entire incident. The sub turned to talk to Lexa for a minute, and Heidi took out a tube of lip gloss out of her bag, gesturing it toward me. Look, she mouthed. New. I felt my blood boiling. When I got to the cafeteria, Heidi, Tracy, and Kelly were sitting at our usual table with Lee and Jake sitting across from them. Out of habit, I started making my way toward them, but as I got closer and closer, my pace slowed until I wasn't walking at all, just standing there as if I were lost. But the thing was, I wasn't lost. I knew exactly where I was. I knew exactly what would happen if I kept going where I was headed. We'd talk about Bea's mysterious surgery, Heidi commenting on it as if the whole thing were as far away from her as Bosnia. We'd talk about Heidi and Kelly and Tracy's shopping spree. We'd make plans for the weekend, maybe agree to do some more shopping or go to a movie. I'd smile and nod and make jokes and flirt with Lee. It would be the way it always was, because that was what being an iGirl was all about. Only, the whole time, it would feel like I was trying not to scream. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Hal and Nia sitting alone at the same table they'd sat at the day last week when Thornhill first called us into his office. Nia was nodding. Hal was talking and gesturing behind him. I looked back the other way. Heidi was lifting her hair off the back of her neck and holding it so the ends fell just below her jaw, turning her head from side to side like she wanted Kelly and Tracy to evaluate what she'd look like with hair of a different length. Tracy and Kelly nodded, then Kelly held her hair the same way, and almost instantly so did Tracy. And suddenly, I knew. I knew why Amanda had wanted me to tell Hal and Nia about the accident. Yes, she wanted me to do the right thing and get some justice for Bea. But more than that, she wanted me to be free, to rise up and protect myself and those around me. Maybe even to protect Amanda herself. Okay, Amanda hadn't chosen me as her only guide, but she had chosen me. She needed me. What good is a guide who's a pushover? I stood where I was for a minute, remembering the final thing Amanda had taught me about bears. They hibernate, which means they sleep for a long, long time, but not forever. This little bear was waking up. As if I hadn't so much as made a choice right there as I'd accepted a choice I'd made a long time ago, I walked to the far end of the cafeteria and stood by Hal and Nia's table. Hal stopped talking and they both looked up at me. Hal like he was glad to see me, and Nia with some suspicion in her eyes. "Hey," said Hal. "Hey," I said. "Did you take a wrong turn? I think your table's over there," said Nia, and gestured in the direction of the eye girls. "You're really not going to give me a hard time about sitting here, are you, Nia?" I asked, and I held her look. Nia seemed uncomfortable, like she'd expected a nasty response and wasn't sure now what to do now that she hadn't gotten one. "I mean, are you for real, or are you just like a tourist or something? Because sometimes it feels like you want it both ways." I knew what she meant, and to prove I was serious, I did the only thing I could. I pulled out a chair and sat down. "I'm for real." Nia looked at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Well, okay then." "Well, okay then," I repeated. We were still staring at one another. "Well, okay then," said Hal, and he did such a good imitation of our serious tone that we both burst out laughing. We were still laughing a minute later when Heidi, Tracy, and Kelly walked up to our table. "Is it opposite day? Are you lost?" demanded Heidi, staring at me, her face wrinkled with disgust. "Or have these losers brainwashed you?" In spite of my earlier determination to stand up for myself, it was disconcerting to have Heidi stare at me with such revulsion. I opened my mouth to respond, but Nia beat me to the punch. "What would someone without a brain know about brainwashing?" "Ha ha!" Heidi snickered. "You're so smart. You think you could not be such a loser." "Oh yeah, Heidi," reported Nia. "If only I were cool enough to pick my friends by the last letter of their names." "Like you even have friends," said Heidi. "Well, I seem to have some of yours," Nia snapped back. "Hey, guys, knock it off." I held up my hand to signal they should stop, and, without getting out of my seat, turned toward the eye girls. "Look, Heidi, I want to have lunch with Hal and Nia today. I know you guys don't really like them, but they're my friends." "They're your friends?" Tracy looked sincerely shocked. "Since when?" I felt a little bad. I mean, what had Tracy and Kelly ever done to me? "People can have a lot of different friends, Tracy." Tracy gave a nasty laugh. I don't think so, Callie. We're not friends with people who are friends with freaks and losers." And suddenly, I didn't feel so bad after all. "Well," I took a deep breath, "then I guess you're not friends with me." "Are you seriously telling me you're choosing those two freakazoid weirdos over us?" asked Heidi. I looked at Hal and Nia. Hal was smiling encouragingly at me, but Nia's face was blank, as if she couldn't have cared less what I said next, and it wouldn't have mattered if I'd stood up and said, "Psych!" and headed off with the eye girls. Only, now I knew Nia, and I knew the only reason she was looking at me like she didn't care what I did next was because she did. "Yes, Heidi," I said. "I am seriously telling you that I'm choosing Hal and Nia over you."
"That is messed up," said Kelly. "That is seriously messed up."
"I hope you realize that Lee is now totally going to dump you," said Heidi. "You are dead to us. What is he going to do with a girlfriend who never gets invited to any parties?" For the first time, I felt the weight of my decision to abandon the eye girls. I hadn't counted on giving up Lee along with everything else. But then I looked into Heidi's snarling face and realized the only thing sadder than breaking up with Lee would be not breaking up with Heidi, Tracy, and Kelly. "Goodbye, Heidi," I said. There was a moment of silence as the three of them stared at me. Then Heidi turned on her heel, and holding up her hand, she said, "You'll regret this," before marching off. A second later, Kelly and Tracy followed suit. I thought they might have looked a little sad, but maybe that was just wishful thinking. Nia and Hal and I sat for a minute without saying anything until Hal finally broke the silence. "Your friends are certainly opinionated." "Yeah," I said, "but you'll notice they tend to share the same opinion." "I'll say, like they share a brain," said Nia, and she reached into her bag and took out an enormous sandwich. "Anyone want half of this roast beef? My mom always sends me with enough food for about 10 people. Her words broke the tension. I could practically see her mother pressing food upon her in the morning. "I'm good," said Hal, taking a sandwich out of his own bag. "Callie, you?" I had $20 in my pocket that my dad had given me that morning, muttering something about a girl needing mad money, but Nia's mom's sandwich looked way better than anything I was going to find in the cafeteria. And there was something about the way Nia was holding it toward me that made me feel like she was offering me more than a sandwich. "Love some," I nodded, and as I expected it would be, Nia's mom's sandwich was delicious. "Okay," said Nia, pushing up the sleeves of her pale gray sweater and settling her elbows on the table. "Just to catch you up, Hal. Hal and I were talking about the envelope you two think you saw in Thornhill's car." I nearly choked on my roast beef. "You're talking about breaking into Thornhill's car?" "We need to see that note." Nia's voice was even, but there was an undercurrent of a threat in it, too. "The note could be anywhere," I pointed out. "It could even be in his house." The possibility of having to ransack Thornhill's house was a little more than I'd bargained for. As if he could read my mind, Hal said, "Let's not borrow trouble. Occam's razor says if it was in his car, then it is in his car. Let's start there." "Oh, please, do you have to bring up Occam's razor?" I asked. "Occam's razor is great. It's handy," Hal started. "You know what I've been thinking about lately?" interrupted Nia. "Amanda's other friends. What luck have they had in finding her?" She was looking off in the distance in a way that made me realize she hadn't heard the last couple of things Hal and I had been saying. "Amanda's other... What are you talking about? Amanda didn't have other friends," I said. Nia smiled at me and patted my hand. "Right. Like you thought she didn't have any other friends, and I thought she didn't have any other friends, and Hal thought, okay. I bowed my head in her direction. Point taken. As I was trying to figure out how we were even supposed to find Amanda's other friends, much less get them to work with us on finding her, Hal's little sister Cornelia materialized at our table. Even though I hadn't seen her in years, I recognized her immediately. She was much taller than she'd been the summer Hal and I hung out, but she still had the same straight red hair up in a high ponytail and the same serious expression I remembered from the few times she'd joined me and Hal in the woods. "Hey, Cornelia," said Hal. "What's up?" "This guy," she said. It was weird to see a little kid here. The middle school has its own cafeteria, and the younger kids basically never come into ours. "Mom put my lunch in your bag," announced Cornelia somberly. "She did?" said Hal, reaching for his backpack. "Why didn't I see it?" "I don't know," said Cornelia. "Why didn't you?" His head almost buried in his bag, Cornelia said, "Callie, you remember my sister, Cornelia. Nia, this is Cornelia. Cornelia, Nia." "Hi," said Cornelia, who didn't seem remotely intimidated by standing in the high school cafeteria or being introduced to two high school girls, one of whom she didn't know. "Hi, Cornelia," I said. "Hi," said Nia. Then she turned to me. "What about distributing flyers?" "You want to paper the school with flyers? Saying what, exactly?" I said. "I don't see it," said Hal, emerging from his bag. "Saying, I don't know, like, if you know anything about Amanda Valentino's whereabouts, please contact. And then we can put our names and numbers at the bottom." "You're eating it." Cornelia pointed to the remains of her lunch. "That's my sandwich," protested Hal, looking down at the half-eaten sandwich in front of him. Let's think about how long it would take Thornhill to rip those down and make us tell him everything we know about Amanda's life and lies, I said.
It's not your sandwich, said Cornelia. It's almond butter and jelly. It's my sandwich. Mom gave you money for lunch today. She didn't make you a sandwich.
No, she... Hal thought for a second. Oh.
Okay, no flyers,
said Nia. What about a Facebook page? I said suddenly. We could make Amanda a Facebook page and see if people visit it. I mean, she could have friends all over the country. I'd been really surprised when I found out Amanda didn't already have one, given how much she moved around and how many people she must have wanted to keep in touch with. Now, of course, her response to my asking her about it, I like my reality to be real, not virtual, seemed a lot less real than it had at the time. She must have friends all over the world, mused Nia. Right, I said, and you can't exactly post flyers in Hong Kong, you know. Well, what if I give you the money Mom gave me so you can buy your lunch and I'll finish the sandwich, said Hal. Okay, Cornelia shrugged. Works for me. What if we built a website, I said. Nia assumed a fake chipper tone. Oh yeah, good thought. She dropped back into her regular voice. Too bad none of us knows how to build a website. I thought of how, now that I wasn't friends with the iGirls anymore, I wasn't even going to be able to upload music to my iPod. Wait, aren't you like Miss Computer Genius? Didn't you hack into the school's surveillance footage history and burn it to a DVD? $2, said Cornelia. $2? said Hal. Hacking into the school's system and building a website aren't exactly the same thing. You have to know what a computer language is to build a website. And that's what's called, HTML, said Cornelia, who was holding out her hand, palm up toward Hal, never looked in our direction. Excuse me? said Nia.
HTML,
repeated Cornelia, palm still raised.
It stands for Hypertext Markup Language. But it's only one of several computer languages you can use to build a website.
I've only got $1.75, complained Hal. I reached into my pocket. Here, I said, I've got a quarter. Cornelia took the money from Hal, then added my quarter to the ones already in her palm. How do you know about computers, I mean? Oh, Cornelia's a total computer genius, said Hal. These kids today. Really? I asked. You could, build a website? Cornelia shrugged. It's no biggie, she said. I don't know, said Nia. I mean, what are the odds that Amanda's not going to be back before we can even start building a website? You can build a website in a day, offered Cornelia. We all turned and looked at her. Are you serious? said Nia. Cornelia shrugged again. I'm telling you, it's easy. Hal snorted. Yeah, easy for you. Could you, get a website ready and not, I couldn't believe how little computer lingua I knew. It was kind of embarrassing. Not launch it. Cornelia finished it for me. Thank you, I said. Yes, not launch it. Sure, she said. First I'll have to register our domain name and secure a host. You've lost me, said Hal, but if it's really easy, I want you to do that. Register that name host thing. Domain name and host. And it costs $30, she said. I'll cover it, said Hal. We'll split it, I said, thinking that the $20 in my pocket and glad I could say it. What do you want to call it? Cornelia asked. The name has to be available. Amanda.com? I asked. Chances are it's already taken, said Cornelia. Most first names are. What about AmandaValentino.com? said Hal. We could put photos of her on it, and your drawings, I said to Hal. His face reddened when I suggested he include his drawings, but he didn't say no. We should post the name she gave to the woman at the Riviera, and even your name. His enthusiasm built as he thought of something else. Maybe she's used them as aliases before. Not to be the major buzzkill or anything, but this all sounds to me like Major Useless Projects 101, said Nia, crumpling up the bag her sandwich had been in for emphasis. Be that as it may, said Hal, I'd feel better about getting prepared. Something in his voice, how low and serious it was, made me uneasy. I looked at him. You think we're going to need it, don't you? I asked. He met my gaze across the table, but he didn't smile or change his tone at all. Like I said, I just feel better getting prepared.